Emily Carter wasn't someone who lived life on the edge. She was practical, hardworking, and always kept her head down. For years, she worked as a waitress at small cafes and catering events just to make ends meet. Her days were long, her feet hurt constantly from standing for hours, but she never complained. Life had taught her that complaining didn't fix anything. It only made things heavier than they already were. But deep inside, Emily carried dreams. Not big, flashy dreams, like winning the lottery or becoming famous, but quiet ones. Dreams of stability, maybe even a little happiness. She wanted more for herself, though she rarely allowed herself to think about it too much. Daydreaming felt like a luxury she couldn't afford when rent was due and bills piled up. One evening, after a particularly tiring shift at a local diner, Emily got a call from the staffing agency she sometimes worked with. They told her about an exclusive gig, a private party at the mansion of Adrian Kingsley, one of the richest men in the city. The name sent a shiver down her spine. Everyone knew who Adrian Kingsley was. He was this mysterious billionaire who had built his empire on cutting-edge technology. People said he was brilliant, reclusive, and lived in a house so grand it looked like something out of a movie. The pay for the job was unbelievable, more money than Emily usually made in a month. At first, she hesitated. Events like these weren't her scene. Fancy parties meant fancy people, and Emily didn't exactly blend into that world. But then again, how could she say no? She needed the cash. So biting her lip, she agreed. The day of the party arrived faster than she expected. As Emily drove toward the address provided, her nerves started kicking in. The closer she got to the mansion, the wider her eyes grew. It wasn't just a house, it was a palace. A sprawling estate surrounded by lush gardens, towering gates, and fountains that sparkled under the golden glow of sunset. Emily parked her car a little further away, feeling self-conscious about her old sedan next to the sleek sports cars lining the driveway. She stepped out, smoothing her uniform, a crisp black dress with an apron tied neatly around her waist. Even though she'd dressed carefully, she still felt out of place. The other servers milling around looked polished and confident, while Emily felt awkward and unsure. Still, she reminded herself why she was here: the paycheck. That thought alone gave her enough courage to walk through the massive front doors. Inside, the mansion was even more breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they seemed to touch the sky. The walls were adorned with paintings that looked priceless, and the floors gleamed like mirrors. Everywhere she turned, there were guests dressed in designer outfits, laughing and chatting over glasses of champagne. Waiters moved gracefully between them, carrying trays loaded with hors d'oeuvres and drinks. Emily took a deep breath and joined the team. She grabbed a tray filled with flutes of bubbly liquid and began weaving her way through the crowd. Each step felt clumsy compared to the effortless glide of the other servers, but she did her best to keep her composure. Her hands trembled slightly as she offered drinks to guests who barely glanced at her before waving her away. These people lived in a completely different world, one where someone like her was invisible unless needed. As she navigated the room, something caught her eye. Near the entrance, on a marble pedestal, stood a black frame. It wasn't overly large or ornate, but there was something about it that drew her attention. Maybe it was the simplicity of the frame against the opulence of everything else. Or maybe it was instinct. Whatever it was, Emily found herself walking toward it, curious. When she finally reached the pedestal and looked at the photo inside, her heart stopped. Her knees went weak, and for a moment she thought she might drop the tray she was holding. There, staring back at her, was a picture of herself. It was unmistakably her. Younger, yes, but definitely her. In the photo, she wore a sundress she remembered well, the one her grandmother used to call sunshine yellow. Her hair was longer in the picture, framing her face in soft waves, and she was smiling so brightly it almost hurt to look at now. Behind her was a backdrop of tall trees bathed in sunlight, a scene she recognized instantly. It was taken during one of those rare, perfect summer days spent at her grandparents' countryside home. Her mind raced. How could this be? Who had taken this picture? And most importantly, why was it sitting here in Adrian Kingsley's mansion, displayed like some kind of centerpiece? Emily stood frozen, unable to tear her eyes away from the photograph. The noise of the party faded into the background as questions swirled in her head. Was this some kind of mistake? Had someone put the wrong photo in the frame? Or was this part of some elaborate prank? Before she could gather her thoughts, a voice startled her. Deep, smooth, and calm, it came from behind her. "Miss Carter," it said. Emily turned sharply, her heart pounding. Standing there was Adrian Kingsley himself, looking every bit the powerful, enigmatic figure everyone talked about. His presence commanded attention, yet there was something softer in his gaze as he studied her face. "I see you found the photo," he said, his tone measured. There was a hint of amusement in his voice, but also something else. Something Emily couldn't quite place. What is this?" she stammered, pointing at the frame. Her voice shook, betraying the turmoil inside her. "Why do you have my picture?" Adrian didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured toward a quieter corner of the room. "Let's talk somewhere we won't be interrupted," he suggested. Emily followed him, her mind spinning with possibilities. Whatever explanation he was about to give, she knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. This expansion adds depth to Emily's character, her struggles, and her emotions, making the story relatable and engaging. "Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the other parts." Emily's legs felt like jelly as she followed Adrian across the grand hall. Her mind was racing with questions, but her voice refused to work. All she could do was clutch the empty tray tightly against her chest, trying not to let it slip from her trembling hands. The noise of the party seemed distant now, muffled by the pounding of her heartbeat in her ears. Every step she took felt heavier than the last, as if gravity itself had decided to weigh her down. Adrian led her to a quiet corner near a towering window that overlooked the sprawling gardens outside. The moonlight streamed through the glass, casting soft shadows on the marble floor. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. There was no trace of the playful charm he'd shown earlier, just seriousness etched into every line of his face. For a moment, they simply stood there, silence stretching between them like an invisible wall. Finally, Emily found her voice. "What is going on?" she asked, her words tumbling out faster than she intended. "Why do you have my picture? Who took it? And why is it here at your party?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her carefully, as if searching for something in her eyes. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. His voice was calm, measured, but there was a hint of emotion beneath the surface, a mix of sadness and guilt. "That photograph," he began slowly, "is older than you might think. It wasn't taken recently. It's from years ago, long before you became a waitress." Emily blinked, confusion clouding her thoughts. "Years ago? But how? I don't understand." Adrian hesitated, as though choosing his next words carefully. "The truth is, Miss Carter, we've met before, a very long time ago." The statement hit Emily like a punch to the gut. "We've met?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "How is that possible? I would remember meeting someone like you." He nodded slightly, acknowledging her skepticism. "You were just a child back then. Too young to recall much of anything, but I remember you clearly." Emily stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. None of it made sense. She had no memory of ever knowing Adrian Kingsley, or anyone remotely like him. Yet the photo proved that their paths had crossed at some point. The evidence was right there, framed in black, staring back at her with a smile she couldn't deny belonged to her. But why keep it? She pressed, her frustration bubbling to the surface. Why display it here tonight where everyone can see it? What does this have to do with me? Adrian sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. For the first time, he looked unsure, almost vulnerable. "This isn't the time or place for explanations," he said quietly. "There's too much to say, and it's not something I can explain in a few sentences. But I will tell you this. Your presence here tonight is no accident." "No accident?" Emily echoed, her brow furrowing. "What does that even mean? Did you invite me here on purpose? Is this some kind of game?" It's not a game, Adrian replied firmly. Far from it. You'll understand soon enough, but for now, trust me when I say that you're important. More important than you realize. Emily wanted to believe him, to find comfort in his words, but doubt gnawed at her insides. Important? How could she be important to someone like Adrian Kingsley? They came from completely different worlds. He lived in mansions and moved among billionaires. She served drinks at parties just to scrape by. The gap between them was impossibly wide, and yet here, he was standing before her talking about connections and memories she couldn't remember. Her gaze drifted back to the photo on the pedestal. The girl in the picture seemed so happy, so carefree. That version of herself felt like a stranger now. Life had changed her in ways she couldn't undo. The weight of responsibility, the struggle to survive, they'd hardened her edges and dimmed the brightness in her smile. Looking at the photo reminded her of everything she'd lost over the years. I need answers, Emily said finally, her voice firm despite the turmoil inside her. If you know something about me, about my past, then you owe it to me to explain. Adrian met her gaze, his own filled with a mixture of regret and determination. I agree, he said, but not here, not tonight. This party isn't the right setting for what needs to be said. Let me take you somewhere quieter tomorrow, where we can talk without distractions. Will you come? Emily hesitated. Everything about this situation screamed danger, red flags waving wildly in her mind. Trusting Adrian felt risky, almost reckless. But at the same time, curiosity burned within her. She needed to know the truth no matter how painful it might be. Whatever secrets lay buried in her past, they were tied to the man standing in front of her. Ignoring them wasn't an option. Fine, she said at last, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. I'll meet you tomorrow. But if this turns out to be some kind of trick with some... It won't, Adrian interrupted, his tone sincere. I promise you, Emily, this is real. And when you hear the full story, you'll understand why I've kept that photo all these years. With that, he stepped back, giving her space to breathe. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Emily more confused than ever. As she watched Adrian disappear into the crowd, she realized one thing for certain. Her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict. For the rest of the evening, Emily went through the motions of her job on autopilot. She carried trays, refilled glasses, and smiled politely at guests, but her mind was elsewhere. The photo haunted her thoughts, replaying itself over and over like a broken record. Who was she really? What secrets did her past hold? And what role did Adrian Kingsley play in uncovering them? When the party finally wound down and the last guest left, Emily lingered in the grand hall, staring at the black frame one final time before heading home. The image of her younger self stayed with her, a reminder that the answers she sought were closer than she thought, and perhaps more complicated than she could imagine. This expansion adds layers to Emily's emotional journey, making the story relatable and engaging while maintaining suspense. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the other parts. The next day felt surreal for Emily. She tossed and turned all night, replaying every moment from the party in her mind. Adrian's words echoed in her head like a puzzle she couldn't solve. Your presence here tonight is no accident. You're important. What did it all mean? And why did he seem so determined to explain everything but refuse to do so at the party? By morning, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, but curiosity kept her moving forward. She arrived at Adrian's mansion right on time, just as he'd instructed. This time, though, there were no crowds of wealthy guests or servers bustling around with trays of food. The estate was eerily quiet, its grandeur somehow more intimidating without the noise and distractions of the previous evening. A staff member greeted her at the door and led her inside. They walked through familiar hallways until they reached what looked like a private study. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that smelled faintly of age and wisdom. A large wooden desk sat in the center of the room, surrounded by cozy armchairs. Despite the opulence of the space, it felt warmer than the rest of the mansion, like a place where real life happened behind closed doors. Adrian was already there, standing near the window with his back to her. He wore casual clothes this time, a dark sweater and trousers, and the change made him seem less like a billionaire mogul and more like an ordinary man. Still, his presence commanded attention. When he turned to face her, his expression was serious but kind. "Thank you for coming," he said softly, gesturing for her to sit. Emily hesitated for a moment before taking one of the chairs across from him. Her fingers fidgeted nervously in her lap as she waited for him to speak. "I know you have questions," Adrian began, sitting down opposite her. "And I promise, I'll answer them as best I can. But first, let me start with something you need to understand about your past." Emily leaned forward slightly, her heart racing. "My past? What does my past have to do with any of this?" Adrian sighed, running a hand over his face as if bracing himself for what he was about to say. "Your family. They weren't always struggling. In fact, they were once very wealthy. Your parents owned vast stretches of land, beautiful countryside property that many people admired." Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. Wealthy? Landowners? None of this sounded familiar. Growing up, she'd been told stories of hardship and loss, not riches and prosperity. "That's impossible," she said firmly. "If we had money, why? Did I grow up poor? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because tragedy struck," Adrian replied, his voice tinged with sadness. "Years ago, your family lost everything due to a corrupt business deal. My father was involved in it." The words hit Emily like a punch to the chest. She stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "Your father? Are you telling me your family ruined mine?" "It's complicated," Adrian admitted, his gaze dropping to the floor. "My father wasn't a good man. He exploited others for profit, including your parents. When their business collapsed, so did their lives. I was young at the time, but I remember the aftermath, the pain it caused. Your parents passed away shortly after, leaving you orphaned. You were sent to live with relatives who shielded you from the truth." Emily felt numb. Everything she thought she knew about her childhood was crumbling before her eyes. The memories of her grandparents' countryside home suddenly took on new meaning. Those sunny days playing in the fields, the laughter shared with her parents, it hadn't been some distant dream. It had been real. And now, hearing Adrian talk about it, she realized how much she'd lost without even knowing it. "But why are you telling me this now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why wait until today to bring this up?" Adrian met her gaze, his own filled with regret. "Because I've spent years trying to make amends for my father's sins. I tracked you down not out of guilt, but because I believed fate had brought us together again. That photo, it's proof of our connection. I kept it because it reminded me of happier times, before everything fell apart." Emily shook her head, struggling to wrap her mind around everything. "So what? You think giving me answers will fix things? Make up for what your father did?" "No," Adrian said quickly, leaning closer. "I don't expect forgiveness. What happened can't be undone. But I want to help you reclaim what was taken from you. That's why I invited you here, to give you the chance to learn the truth and decide what comes next." For a long moment, Emily didn't respond. She sat there staring at her hands, letting the weight of his words sink in. It was overwhelming, too much to process all at once. Part of her wanted to walk away, to shut out the pain and confusion and go back to her simple, predictable life. But another part of her burned with questions. Questions about her parents, about the land they once owned, about the life she might have lived if fate hadn't intervened. "What happens now?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "That depends on you," Adrian replied gently. "If you want, I can show you documents, records, anything that proves what I've told you is true. Or if you'd rather leave and never look back, I'll respect that too. But I hope you'll stay, not just for answers, but because I believe we can work together to rebuild what was lost." Emily nodded slowly, still unsure of what to do. She needed time to think, to process everything he'd said. But deep down, she knew one thing for certain. Walking away wouldn't erase the truth. Whether she liked it or not, her past was tied to Adrian's, and uncovering it might be the only way to move forward. As they sat there in silence, the room seemed smaller somehow, the distance between them shrinking with each passing second. For the first time since meeting him, Emily allowed herself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Adrian wasn't the villain she'd assumed him to be. Maybe he was as much a victim of his father's actions as she was. This expansion dives deeper into the emotional complexity of Emily's discovery, while keeping the narrative engaging and relatable. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the other parts. Over the next few days, Emily's world felt like it had been turned upside down. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of Adrian's face, heard his voice explaining things she never imagined possible. Her parents, wealthy landowners, a corrupt deal orchestrated by Adrian's father that destroyed their lives. It was almost too much to comprehend. But the more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Anger burned inside her, not just at Adrian's father for what he'd done, but also at herself for feeling conflicted. Part of her wanted to hate Adrian outright. After all, his family was responsible for everything she'd lost. Her parents' happiness, their legacy, even the stable childhood she might have had. But another part of her couldn't ignore the sincerity in his eyes when he spoke. He seemed genuinely remorseful, as if carrying the weight of his father's sins on his own shoulders. Still, Emily knew better than to trust anyone blindly. She needed proof, not just words, but tangible evidence that backed up Adrian's story. So when he offered to show her documents and records tied to her family's past, she agreed without hesitation. The truth was buried somewhere, and she intended to dig it up no matter how painful it might be. Adrian kept his promise. Over the following week, he invited Emily back to the mansion several times, each visit bringing new revelations. He showed her old photographs of her parents standing proudly beside acres of lush farmland, legal papers detailing ownership of the property, and newspaper clippings from decades ago praising their contributions to the community. There were also documents outlining the business deal that led to their downfall, a scheme so twisted it made Emily's stomach churn. As she sifted through the files, memories she didn't know she had began surfacing. Fragments of laughter, sunny afternoons, spent running barefoot through fields, the smell of fresh hay. It all came rushing back. These weren't distant dreams. They were real moments from her life before tragedy struck. And now, seeing them laid out in front of her, she understood why her grandparents had always spoken so fondly of the countryside. It wasn't nostalgia. It was love for something they'd once cherished deeply. But with every piece of the puzzle falling into place, Emily's doubts grew stronger. Why was Adrian doing this? What did he stand to gain by helping her uncover the truth? Was he truly motivated by guilt? Or was there some hidden agenda lurking beneath his polished exterior? Her suspicions reached a breaking point one afternoon, when she decided to snoop around his office while he stepped out to take a call. It wasn't planned. She hadn't gone there intending to pry. But curiosity got the better of her. As she wandered through the room, her gaze landed on a stack of papers left carelessly on his desk. They looked harmless enough, but something about them caught her attention. She picked them up and began flipping through the pages. At first glance, they appeared to be blueprints and development plans. But as she read further, her blood ran cold. The documents outlined a massive real estate project set to be built on the exact land her family once owned. Luxury villas, shopping, centers, parks, the works. It was a dream proposal for any developer, promising millions in profit. And according to the paperwork, Adrian's company was leading the charge. Emily's hands trembled as she stared at the plans, her mind racing. This wasn't just coincidence, it was betrayal. All those talks about making amends, about helping her reclaim her family's legacy, it was all a lie. Adrian hadn't tracked her down out of guilt or fate. He'd done it because he needed her approval, maybe even her signature to move forward with his plans. By the time Adrian returned, Emily was seething. She stood in the middle of the room, clutching the documents tightly in her hands, her knuckles white with anger. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusing. Adrian froze, his expression shifting from surprise to guilt in an instant. "Emily," he started, taking a step toward her. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" she snapped, cutting him off. "How you're using me to get what you want. How you lied about wanting to help me reclaim my family's land, only to turn around and destroy it completely." "It's not like that," Adrian said quickly, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I swear I never meant to deceive you. Yes, we've been working on developing the land, but not for personal gain. I wanted to rebuild it, to honor your family's memory while creating something sustainable for the future." "Don't give me that nonsense," Emily shot back, her voice rising. "You think slapping a fancy label on it makes it okay? That land belonged to my parents. It was their life's work, their dream, and now you're trying to take it away from them. All over again." "I'm not taking anything," Adrian insisted, his tone desperate. "If anything, I'm giving it back, don't you see? This project could restore what was lost. It could bring jobs, opportunities, growth. We can do this together, Emily. You and me." "Together?" Emily laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about partnerships or rebuilding. This is about power, about control. You think throwing money at the problem fixes everything, but it doesn't. My family's land wasn't just dirt and trees. It was a piece of who they were, who I am, and you're treating it like it's nothing more than a business opportunity." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Emily's ragged breathing. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't cry in front of him, not now, not ever. She'd spent her entire life fighting to keep going despite the odds, and she wasn't about to let Adrian Kingsley break her spirit. Adrian opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked truly lost, like a man who'd run out of excuses. Finally, he sighed and sank into a chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to ward off a headache. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "I should have told you about the project sooner. I should have been honest. But please believe me when I say my intentions were good. I wanted to create something meaningful, not just for me, but for you, for your family." Emily crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. "Good intentions don't erase bad actions," she said firmly. "And until I figure out what I want to do about all this, I think it's best if we stay away from each other." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Adrian sitting alone amidst the ruins of their fragile trust. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not until she was far away from him and the tangled web of lies he represented. As she drove home that evening, Emily replayed the confrontation in her mind over and over. Betrayal stung worse than she'd expected, gnawing at her insides like a relentless ache. But beneath the anger and hurt, there was clarity. Clarity about who she was, where she came from, and what mattered most to her. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. She wouldn't let anyone, least of all Adrian Kingsley, dictate her future. This expansion builds tension and highlights Emily's emotional journey as she grapples with betrayal and self-discovery. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the other parts. Weeks passed, and Emily threw herself into uncovering every detail about her family's past. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, more than what Adrian had told her, more than what the documents revealed. Every night after work, she'd sit at her small kitchen table surrounded by papers, photographs, and notes scribbled on scraps of paper. Her apartment became a makeshift archive, cluttered with fragments of history she was piecing together like a puzzle. One evening, as she sifted through an old box of belongings left to her by her grandparents, she stumbled upon something unexpected. A bundle of letters tied neatly with a faded ribbon. The handwriting on the envelopes was delicate but firm, unmistakably her mother's. Curiosity tugged at her, and she carefully untied the ribbon, pulling out the first letter. As she began reading, tears welled up in her eyes. The letters were written by her mother during the final years of her life. They weren't addressed to anyone in particular. Instead, they read like journal entries, filled with memories, hopes, and dreams for the future. Her mother wrote about the land, the rolling hills, the fields of wildflowers, the quiet streams where she used to picnic with Emily's father. She described how much joy it brought them, how hard they worked to build a life around it. But she also spoke of heartbreak, the betrayal, the loss, the pain of watching everything slip away. What struck Emily most was the resilience in her mother's words. Despite everything, her parents never stopped believing in the goodness of people or the possibility of rebuilding. One day, her mother had written, "This land will rise again, not just as a place but as a symbol of hope, a reminder that even when life knocks you down, you can stand back up." Reading those words felt like hearing her mother's voice for the first time in years. It was comforting yet bittersweet. Emily realized that her parents' legacy wasn't just about ownership or wealth. It was about connection to the earth, to each other, and to the community they served. For the first time, she understood why Adrian's plans had hurt so deeply. It wasn't just about the land being developed. It was about losing that connection once again. But understanding didn't mean forgiveness. Emily still struggled with Adrian's deception. How could he claim to honor her family's memory while planning to transform their beloved land into luxury villas? Yet, as angry as she was, she couldn't deny that his intentions seemed genuine, at least on some level. He hadn't acted out of malice, but out of ambition mixed with guilt. That realization softened her anger slightly, though it did little to ease her mistrust. Determined to find closure, Emily decided to confront Adrian one last time. She wanted answers, not excuses, and she hoped this meeting would finally bring clarity. When she arrived at the mansion, she found him waiting in the same study where they'd argued weeks earlier. He looked tired, as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a vulnerability that surprised her. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said softly, gesturing for her to sit. "After everything that happened." "I needed time," Emily replied, taking a seat across from him. Her voice was calm, but firm. "Time to think, to read, to understand. And now, I'm ready to hear your side of things. One last time." Adrian nodded, leaning forward slightly. "Thank you for giving me another chance," he said. "I know I messed up. I should have been honest with you from the start. But I need you to believe me when I say my goal has always been to make amends, not exploit." Emily studied his face, searching for any sign of dishonesty. All she saw was sincerity. Still, she wasn't ready to let her guard down completely. "Then tell me," she said, her tone steady. "Why develop the land at all? Why not leave it untouched? Wouldn't that be the best way to honor my family?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "At first I thought leaving it untouched might be the answer, but then I realized doing nothing wouldn't change anything. Your family's land holds incredible potential, not just financially but socially. Imagine creating a space where families can thrive, where businesses can grow, where nature and modernity coexist. That's what I envisioned, a sustainable development that respects the land's history while building a brighter future." "But how do you define respect?" Emily challenged. "To me, respect means preserving the soul of the land, the stories, the memories, the essence of what made it special. What you're proposing feels like erasing all of that." Adrian sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Maybe I got carried away with grand designs instead of focusing on what truly matters. If we move forward, it has to be done differently. Together." "Together?" Emily repeated, raising an eyebrow. "How exactly do you see that working?" "I want you to take the lead," Adrian said earnestly. "Not just as a consultant or advisor, but as a partner. You know the land better than anyone. You carry your family's legacy in your heart. Let's create something that honors them, not just in name, but in spirit. Something that reflects who they were and what they stood for." For a moment, Emily didn't respond. The idea of partnering with Adrian felt risky, almost impossible. Could she trust him enough to share such a monumental responsibility? Yet, deep down, she knew he was right about one thing. Doing nothing wouldn't restore her family's legacy. Action was needed, but it had to be the right kind of action. What would that look like? She asked finally, her voice softer now. How do we ensure the project stays true to my family's values? We start by listening, Adrian replied. To you, to the community, to the land itself. We design with care, incorporating elements that reflect your family's history. The trees, the streams, the open spaces. We prioritize sustainability and accessibility, making sure it benefits everyone involved. And above all, we keep your family's name alive, front and center, as a testament to their contributions. Emily sat quietly, letting his words sink in. It was a bold proposal, one that required compromise and trust. Two things she wasn't sure she could offer yet. But as she thought about her mother's letters and the dreams they contained, she realized something important. Her parents had always believed in second chances, in finding beauty in brokenness. Perhaps it was time she did the same. Okay, she said slowly, surprising even herself. Let's try. But on one condition. No shortcuts. No cutting corners to save money or time. If we're going to do this, we do it right. Adrian smiled faintly, relief washing over his features. Deal, he said simply. We'll do it your way. As they shook hands, Emily felt a flicker of hope. A fragile, tentative thing, but hope nonetheless. Rebuilding her family's legacy wouldn't be easy, and trusting Adrian wouldn't happen overnight. But for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a future where the land wasn't just a battleground for betrayal and regret. It could become a symbol of healing, renewal, and unity. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth fighting for. This expansion delves deeper into Emily's emotional journey as she grapples with forgiveness, reconciliation, and the decision to move forward. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the final part. Months passed and Emily threw herself into the project with a determination she didn't know she possessed. It wasn't easy. Working alongside Adrian still felt like walking on thin ice, but she refused to let doubt or fear hold her back. This was her chance to reclaim her family's legacy, to turn pain into purpose. She wasn't going to waste it. The two of them spent countless hours brainstorming ideas, visiting the land, and consulting experts who could help bring their vision to life. At first, their partnership was awkward, almost forced. Emily remained, guarded, wary of Adrian's intentions despite his efforts to prove himself trustworthy. But as time went on, something shifted between them. Slowly, tentatively, they began to trust each other, not just as collaborators but as people. One afternoon, while standing on the edge of a hill overlooking the property, Emily paused to take it all in. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light across the fields below. Wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze and the distant sound of birdsong filled the air. For a moment she closed her eyes, letting the peacefulness wash over her. This place still held magic it always had, and now, for the first time in years, she felt connected to it again. You okay? Adrian asked, breaking the silence. He stood a few feet away, hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. Emily opened her eyes and nodded. Yeah, she said softly. I was just thinking about my parents, about how much they loved this land. They'd be proud of you. Adrian replied, his voice sincere. What you're doing here, it's incredible. She glanced at him, surprised by the warmth in his words. Thanks, she murmured. But we're not done yet. There's still so much work to do. He smiled faintly. True. But look how far we've come already. You've turned something broken into something beautiful. That takes courage. For the first time since they'd started working together, Emily allowed herself to believe him. Courage. That's what this whole journey had been about. Finding the strength to face the past, to forgive, and to build anew. And though she still carried scars from everything that had happened, she realized those scars were part of her story. They made her who she was today. As the months rolled on, the project began taking shape. Fields once left untended were transformed into vibrant green spaces dotted with wildflowers. Walking trails wound through the hills, connecting small clusters of eco-friendly homes designed to blend seamlessly with the landscape. A community center rose near the heart of the property, complete with classrooms, workshops, and meeting spaces where locals could gather. Every detail reflected Emily's vision, a balance of progress and preservation, honoring her family's history while looking toward the future. Throughout it all, Emily and Adrian grew closer. Their shared mission brought them together in ways neither of them expected. Late-night conversations turned into moments of genuine connection, laughter replacing tension. Emily found herself opening up to him in ways she never thought possible, sharing stories about her childhood, her dreams, and even her fears. In return, Adrian revealed pieces of himself he rarely showed to anyone: his struggles growing up under the shadow of his father's mistakes, his desire to make amends, and his hope for redemption. By the time the project neared completion, their bond had deepened into something neither of them could ignore. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was close. A spark of understanding, respect, and mutual admiration that neither of them wanted to extinguish. On the day of the grand opening, Emily stood at the top of the hill once more, this time surrounded by people. Friends, neighbors, local officials, and members of the community mingled below, celebrating the transformation of the land. Laughter echoed through the air, and children ran freely along the trails, their joy infectious. Emily watched it all unfold, tears glistening in her eyes. Adrian approached her carrying a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked earlier that morning. "These are for you," he said, handing them to her with a shy smile. "A small token of gratitude for everything you've done." Emily accepted the flowers, touched by the gesture. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But this isn't just my accomplishment, it's ours." He shook his head. "No, it's yours. I may have helped, but this is your dream, your family's legacy. And seeing it come to life, it's given me hope too." They fell silent then, watching the festivities below. After a moment, Adrian spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "Do you think your parents would approve?" Emily smiled, clutching the flowers tightly. "I think they'd be proud," she said. "Not just of me, but of us, of what we've built together." Adrian looked at her, his expression softening. "You know," he said hesitantly, "this project has changed me in ways I never anticipated. Working with you, it's made me see things differently, made me want to be better." Emily met his gaze, her heart skipping a beat. "Better how?" "Better for you," he admitted, his cheeks flushing slightly. "If you'll let me." Her breath caught in her throat. For a long moment, she simply stared at him, unsure of what to say. Then slowly, she reached out and took his hand. "We'll figure it out," she said finally, her voice steady. "Together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. Forgiveness and growth rarely were, but she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't alone anymore. With Adrian by her side and her family's spirit alive in every blade of grass, every tree, and every corner of the land, she had everything she needed to face whatever came next. And for the first time in her life, Emily truly believed in happy endings, not the kind written in fairy tales, but the messy, imperfect, real-life kind. The kind born from struggle, sacrifice, and second chances. The kind worth fighting for. This final expansion ties together the emotional arcs of both characters, emphasizing forgiveness, growth, and the power of collaboration. Let me know if you'd like any further adjustments.